When my wife passed, I thought our son would stand beside me to say goodbye. Instead, he said, "Dad, Laura's birthday is important. You cannot expect me to ruin it for a funeral." His words froze me where I stood. The very next day, as if nothing had happened, he showed up asking for a favor. He believed I would fold like I always had, but this time, I was ready. It was the moment to deliver the justice his mother never lived to see. Before we go further, do me a favor. Subscribe to the channel and leave a comment down below. What would you do if your own child skipped their mother's funeral to celebrate something else? The morning my wife Helen died, the world felt hollow. The air in our home carried a silence that pressed against my chest like weight. Her favorite teacup still sat on the table, faint traces of her last drink inside, and the window she always opened in the morning was closed, sealing away the little breeze she loved. For 40 years we had shared this house, filling it with arguments and laughter, with late-night talks about bills and with whispers of love before we fell asleep. Now it was just me and the walls that seemed too wide, too empty. The hardest part was knowing that her son, our son Daniel, would not honor her in death the way she had honored him in life. I had called him the night before the funeral. My voice was low, trembling from exhaustion and grief. "Daniel, the service is tomorrow at noon. We are gathering at Green Hill Chapel. Your mother deserves your presence." His response was sharp, almost rehearsed. "Dad, you cannot expect me to cancel Laura's birthday party. It has been planned for months. Mom is gone, nothing will change that. But Laura only turns 32 once." He said it like it was common sense, as if death could be measured against a party. My hand gripped the phone so tightly, my knuckles turned pale. "Daniel, your mother raised you every day for 35 years. She loved you beyond reason, and you choose balloons and cake over her burial?" He sighed, impatient, laughter and music spilling through the receiver in the background. "Dad, I do not need guilt right now. We already hired a band. People are coming. It is too late to back out. I will come by another time." Then the line went dead. I stood in the kitchen, staring at the silent receiver, the faint hum of the refrigerator filling the room. Helen's reading glasses rested by the window, the ones she always misplaced. For 3 minutes, I did not move. My heart thundered in my ears. When I finally sat down, the chair felt as if it had doubled in weight. The thought of telling her sister Patricia that her nephew, the boy Helen had always defended, would not come, filled me with dread. The funeral day arrived under a sky that could not decide whether to rain. I wore the black suit Helen had insisted I buy years ago, the one I had avoided because it felt too formal for weddings and celebrations. The chapel filled. Slowly, friends from her garden club, our neighbors, women she had worked beside at the hospital years earlier. 24 people in total, all carrying flowers, soft whispers, and faces heavy with sadness. And one glaring absence. Patricia kept leaning toward me, whispering, "Where is Daniel?" He was supposed to be a pallbearer. I kept my eyes forward, gripping the folded program in my hands. "He had important commitments," I murmured, my throat tight. "Important commitments." The words tasted like ash. When the service began, the pastor spoke gently about love, family, and the eternal bond between husband and wife. He spoke of Helen's kindness, how she had tended not only her own family but the community as well. I listened, each sentence a reminder of the life she had lived for others. My eyes fell on the casket, polished oak that gleamed under the dim chapel lights. The empty space beside me screamed louder than any hymn. Daniel's absence carved a wound deeper than the grave itself. When we moved to the cemetery, I felt every step like lead. Friends lowered the casket into the ground, while Patricia clutched my arm, asking again where Daniel was. I gave the same hollow answer. The first shovel of dirt struck the lid, and I felt my insides twist. With every fall of earth, it was not just Helen I buried, but also my illusion that our son loved her the way she had loved him. Mrs. Henderson, an old neighbor, whispered, "She was so proud of him." Always spoke of his achievements. My eyes stung, but I forced the tears back. Helen had protected him even when he skipped her chemo appointments, always saying, "He is busy with his new life. He will come through." She had defended him until her last breath. And here he was, celebrating a birthday while his mother was laid to rest. Driving home afterward, I could not bring myself to turn on the radio. The passenger seat looked naked without Helen's presence. She always preferred her small hybrid car, claiming it was better for the environment. But I had insisted on taking my truck. Now, with her gone, I regretted every small disagreement, every delay in doing what she had wanted. Our street appeared unchanged, neat lawns, painted mailboxes, families living the ordinary lives Helen had once cherished. But stepping inside the house, I felt how much had changed. The air carried that stillness again, the kind that makes you want to slam a door just to break it. I loosened my tie and sank into the brown leather chair she hated, the one she said clashed with her floral curtains. She had begged me to replace it, but I had always said, someday. Now I stared at those curtains, knowing they would remain until the fabric wore out. Because the woman who wanted them gone was buried under fresh soil. On the mantel, our wedding photos smiled back at me. Helen at 22, radiant in her grandmother's gown, promising a life we truly gave each other. She had kept her promise. I thought I had, too, until Daniel's betrayal showed me the cracks in everything we had built. The memories came uninvited. Daniel's first steps across the same living room floor, his small hands reaching for Helen. Birthday parties with paper streamers she had made herself. Nights when she worked overtime so we could keep the house and still save for his education. I remembered her whispering, "We are building Daniel's future," even as she sacrificed her health for another double shift. Every sacrifice, every choice had been for him. And now, when her future ended, he did not show up. In our bedroom, her Bible still lay on the nightstand. A slip of paper fell out when I picked it up. In her careful handwriting, she had written, "My dearest Edward, do not let Daniel forget us." We gave him all we had. I hope that is enough. My hands trembled reading those words. I realized with cold certainty that it had not been enough. Later that evening, after I poured myself a glass of water and left it untouched, the phone buzzed. Daniel's name lit up the screen. I stared at it, feeling the rage build, but I did not answer. I let it ring, imagining him surrounded by streamers, cake, and music, untouched by the reality of his mother's fresh grave. When the call ended, I set the phone down gently, as if it might explode. I wandered into Helen's sewing room, where half-finished projects still lay in baskets. Her favorite scarf sat draped over the chair, threads trailing. I sat there in the dim light, the silence pressing in. My mind kept replaying his words. Mom is gone. Laura's birthday only happens once. They had been the coldest words I had ever heard from him. That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, and decided something within me had changed. I would not forget what he said. I would not let it pass. The next morning, just as the sun rose and painted the kitchen window gold, I heard a knock at the door. My son stood on the other side, his shirt wrinkled from a long night, his expression casual as if yesterday had been nothing more than a missed dinner. He carried no flowers, no sorrow, only expectation. "Dad," he said, "I need to talk. I have a request." Those words clung to me like frost. The audacity of them, arriving less than 24 hours after his mother had been lowered into the ground, struck me as worse than the betrayal itself. I studied Daniel's face, searching for a trace of shame, but there was none. His eyes carried the casual look of someone who believed his father would always open the door, always say yes, no matter the circumstances. I told him I was not in the mood and closed the door gently, leaving him on the porch. Through the curtain, I watched him stand there for a moment, then shrug and walk away, phone already in hand. He did not even notice the flowers left by Helen's old friends on the steps, tripping over one of the vases without stopping to pick it up. The house swallowed me again in silence. I walked slowly through the rooms, each corner alive with reminders of her. The kitchen carried the scent of cinnamon still lingering from her last batch of muffins. In the living room, the blanket she had always wrapped around her shoulders was folded neatly on the sofa, as if waiting for her return. Upstairs, I found myself in her sewing room again. This time I opened the small wooden chest she had kept tucked beneath the desk, one I had never looked through. Inside were stacks of papers, yellowed with years, her tidy handwriting on many of them. The first bundle I opened contained Daniel's report cards, saved from grade school all the way through college. On the margins, she had scribbled notes. "So proud of him today," or "He tried his best, that is what matters." I felt my throat tighten as I read them. Each one a little love letter she had written not to him directly, but to her own hope that he would someday live up to her belief in him. Beneath the report cards were copies of bank slips, receipts, and notes she had kept for herself. One page caught my attention. Anniversary dinner canceled. Daniel needed $400 for car repairs. Doctor visit postponed. Daniel short on rent. Skipped vacation. Daniel wants money for engagement ring. My hands shook as I realized how many small sacrifices we had made without even counting them. Each one had seemed harmless at the time, just part of being parents. But when stacked together, they formed a mountain. I carried the papers to my desk in the study and began to sort them. For the first time, I added up the numbers. The tuition checks. 4 years at Ridgeview University, $56,000 each year. The graduate program in Chicago, $46,000, abandoned halfway through when he decided it was not for him. The European trip, $32,000, pitched as a temporary break before career responsibilities. The down payment for the house, $340,000, which I had covered in full after he promised he would make it up once his business took off. The wedding costs, $72,000 for the venue, catering, and Laura's gown. Every cent I had written from my own accounts. The first car, $34,000. The emergency loans. Scattered across the years, $5,000 here, $12,000 there, sometimes for bills, sometimes for vacations, sometimes simply for Laura's birthday extravaganzas. The total number on my calculator kept climbing, digits forming a sentence louder than any argument. More than $750,000, $832,500. Nearly $1 million poured into Daniel's life. Money earned from decades of construction work, late nights, weekends, and missed family moments. Money Helen had worked double shifts for, smiling through her exhaustion, telling me, "It is worth it, Edward. We are building his future." She had given her health for him, and I had given my years, and he could not give a single day back for her funeral. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the piles of paper that told the story of my marriage, my parenthood, my sacrifices. On the wall hung our wedding photo, Helen glowing, me standing beside her with hope in my eyes. Hope that our son would carry us forward, that he would embody our love. Instead, those papers told the story of indulgence, entitlement, and betrayal. My gaze drifted to Helen's nightstand, where her Bible still lay. I had seen the note inside, but now I searched through the pages more carefully. Near the back, folded between Psalms, was another slip of paper. Edward, it read, I worry we have done too much for him. He takes and takes, and I am afraid we have not taught him what love really means. Please promise me you will not let him forget who we are. I closed my eyes, the weight of her words pressing on me. She had known. Even in her kindness, she had seen the truth. I realized I had been blind, making excuses, believing every time Daniel said he would pay us back or show his gratitude. Helen had carried that worry with her into her final days, and I had dismissed it. Now she was gone, and I could see clearly what she had meant. As the night deepened, I sat in that study with only the tick of the clock for company. I looked at the files, at the careful handwriting of my wife, and at the cold numbers. For years, I had been emotional, allowing guilt and love to guide me. That night, something shifted. I stopped seeing Daniel as my son and started seeing him as a man who had used us until there was nothing left to give. I thought of my own father, a hard man who once handed me $20 when I left home and told me, "Make your own way." At the time, I had thought him cruel. Now I wondered if he had understood something I did not. When I finally stood, the room spun with exhaustion. I walked past Helen's empty chair in the living room, touched the back of it gently, and whispered, "You were right to worry." In the quiet, I felt a resolve building in me, harder than grief, sharper than anger. For the first time, I was ready to stop being the father who gave endlessly. I was ready to become the man who held his son accountable. The phone buzzed on the table again. Daniel's name glowed on the screen. I let it ring until it went dark. My reflection in the black glass stared back at me. No longer the grieving husband, but something colder, something steadier. I gathered Helen's papers into a neat pile and locked them in the desk drawer. They would be the foundation of what came next. Daniel thought he could arrive at my door with requests, believing I would hand him the world without hesitation. He thought he could bury his mother's memory under party lights and music. He was wrong. I now had proof of every sacrifice, every dollar, every moment he had taken, and I had the will to act. The following morning, I woke before dawn. The first thing I did was walk to the garage and open the filing cabinet where all of our financial documents were stored. I pulled out old loan, agreements, bank statements, even the promissory notes Daniel had signed for some of the larger sums. He had forgotten them, but I had not. His signatures stared up at me, legally binding and undeniable. For years, I had let them sit untouched because family loyalty mattered more than paperwork. That loyalty was gone now. I spread the documents across the desk like weapons laid out before battle. My coffee grew cold as I examined them one by one, remembering each request, each excuse, each promise that had dissolved into silence. I realized then that I did not just have grief to work with. I had leverage. And leverage, in the hands of a man with nothing left to lose, could dismantle everything Daniel thought he had built. By noon that day, I had already called an old friend from the bank, I spoke calmly, explaining that I wanted to review certain guarantees and co-signed loans. He agreed to meet later in the week. My voice did not shake. My hands did not tremble. For the first time since Helen's death, I felt in control. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the houses across the street, Daniel arrived again. He parked carelessly, stepping out with his usual swagger, phone glued to his ear. He walked up the driveway as if nothing had happened, as if he had not abandoned his mother at her final moment. I watched from the window, unseen. He rang the bell twice, then 3 times, growing impatient. When I finally opened the door, his face lit up with that practiced smile he used when he wanted something. "Dad, you have no idea how important this is," he began, already launching into his request. I let him speak, let him spin his words, let him show me once again the man he had become. But inside, I was no longer listening with the ears of a father. I was listening with the mind of a man preparing his first strike. Daniel stepped inside without waiting for me to invite him. He tossed his keys on the counter as if it were still his home and leaned casually against the kitchen island. "Dad, we need your help," he began, his voice light, but his tone rehearsed. "Laura's birthday party went better than we imagined, but we went a little over budget. Between the band, the restaurant, and the gifts, the bills added up faster than we thought. We are looking at about $14,000 we need covered immediately. Can you wire it to my account?" I stared at him. His request fell into the air like poison. Helen's flowers from the funeral still sat on the table behind me, wilting quietly. His mother had not been gone a week, and here he was, asking me to pay for a party. 14,000, I repeated slowly, tasting the words like acid. He nodded, brushing it off as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "Yeah, it is not a lot compared to everything you have done before. I promise we will pay you back once things stabilize. You know how it is, Dad. Life is expensive, and you would not want us to fall behind over something silly like a party bill." I tightened my jaw. "Your mother's funeral was yesterday." Daniel hesitated for the briefest second, then sighed and lifted his hands as though I were the one being unreasonable. "Dad, I told you. Mom is gone. You cannot change that. But Laura's birthday only happens once a year. It was important for her. She deserves nice things." My chest burned. I pictured Helen sitting through chemo while Daniel missed appointment after appointment. I remembered her smile, thin and weak, saying, "He is just busy with his new life." She had always defended him, always. And here he was, proving her wrong in the worst way. "No," I said finally. The single syllable dropped between us with a weight I had never allowed before. Daniel blinked, caught off guard. "What do you mean, no?" "I mean no," I said, my voice steady. "I will not give you another dollar." For a moment, he looked at me as though I were speaking a foreign language. In his entire life, I had never denied him. He had grown on the certainty that if he asked, I would provide. Now, faced with refusal, his mask slipped, his eyes hardened. "Dad, do not be ridiculous. This is not a big ask. You can afford it. You always told me family helps family. Or is that no longer true?" I met his stare. "Family honors family. Your mother deserved your presence at her funeral. You chose champagne and streamers instead. That is not family." His face flushed, and I saw the anger he usually hid behind charm. "This is unbelievable. Mom would want you to help me. She always said you should support me no matter what." I almost laughed. The manipulation was so thin, so predictable. Your mother wanted you to show her love. You failed her in life, and you failed her in death. Do not speak for her." Daniel's lips tightened. He tapped his fingers against the counter, his body restless, his words sharper now. "Fine. If you want to be cold, then be cold. But do not expect me to come around much anymore if this is how you treat your son." For 35 years, that line had been his weapon, the threat of absence. He knew how Helen longed for him, how she forgave anything just to see his smile. For decades, his presence had been the reward we paid for, his absence the punishment we feared. But now, Helen was gone, and I no longer feared his absence. I welcomed it. "I understand," I said calmly. He frowned, confused by my tone. "You understand?" "Yes, I understand exactly who you are." The silence stretched, his disbelief written all over his face. Then he laughed bitterly, shaking his head. "You have lost it. You are letting grief cloud your judgment. I will give you some time to cool off, then we can talk like normal." He picked up his keys and left, the door slamming behind him. The moment it shut, I sank into the chair by the table. My hands trembled, but not from fear or regret. For the first time in decades, I had said no to my son. The air felt different, cleaner, sharper. My grief remained, but beneath it, something else grew, a steel resolve. I walked back into my study and spread the papers across the desk once more. Every transfer, every promissory note, every debt I had co-signed. Daniel believed they were forgotten relics of the past. He thought my loyalty to family erased the ink on those pages. But the ink remained. The law remembered, and so did I. Over the next several days, I moved quietly. I called the bank and confirmed meetings. I contacted old acquaintances who owed me favors, men who understood finance and law better than Daniel ever would. I reviewed accounts, guarantees, and insurance policies. Slowly, methodically, I began to dismantle the safety nets that held Daniel's life together. At night, when I sat in Helen's chair with her Bible in my lap, I felt her presence. Her words echoed in my head. "I worry we have done too much for him." She had known this moment would come. I whispered to her photo, "You were right. It is time he learns what life without us really means." 3 nights after the funeral, Daniel tried again. He showed up at my doorstep, his voice softer this time, his smile more calculated. "Dad, I am sorry if I sounded harsh before. I know you are grieving, and maybe I should have handled things differently. But we are in a tight spot. You know Laura's family cannot help the way you can. Please, just this once more." I did not step aside. I blocked the doorway, the cold air rushing between us. "No, Daniel." He studied me, disbelief turning to irritation, irritation turning to anger. "So this is how it is now? Mom dies, and suddenly you are cutting me off, after everything we have been through?" "After everything your mother went through," I corrected. His jaw clenched. For the first time, he realized I was not bending. He turned without another word, storming down the driveway, his voice carrying across the street as he muttered curses into his phone. Neighbors heard, curtains moved, and I stood in the doorway, unshaken. When I closed the door, I knew something had shifted permanently. Daniel had lived his whole life as if gratitude were optional and entitlement were his birthright. Now, stripped of his control over me, he was exposed. He would try to fight back. He would try to manipulate again. But I had something he did not. The truth of his actions, the proof of his debts, and the will to act. The following morning, I sat at my desk as the first light of dawn touched Helen's photo. I opened a folder labeled Loans and began making calls. Each one was another brick pulled from the foundation of Daniel's world. Each one was a step toward justice. Not revenge for my sake, but justice for Helen, who had given everything and asked for nothing. I realized then that grief had two faces, one soft and broken, weeping for what was lost, the other hard and determined, demanding balance. I had spent enough time with the first. Now it was time for the second. By the end of that week, Daniel would discover his world was not as stable as he believed. By the end of that month, he would understand what it meant to choose selfishness over love. And by the end of my plan, he would stand exactly where he had left his mother, buried by the weight of his own choices. The following Monday, I walked into the marble lobby of the Cedarbrook First National Bank. For decades, I had conducted my business here. Mortgages, business loans, payroll accounts, all run through their offices. They knew me not only as a client, but as a man who paid his debts on time, who honored his word. That reputation had weight, and I intended to use every ounce of it. David Palmer, the branch manager, greeted me with the same formal smile he had used for 20 years. "Edward, I was sorry to hear about Helen," he said sincerely, shaking my hand. His sympathy was genuine, but I did not allow myself to falter. I carried a folder under my arm, filled with documents that would redefine my relationship with Daniel. We sat in his corner office overlooking the Cedar River, sunlight glinting on the water. I opened the folder, spreading out copies of the promissory notes Daniel had signed and the loan guarantees I had provided over the years. David frowned, recognizing the scale of them. "I want to discuss removing myself from every guarantee tied to Daniel Foster," I said plainly. David adjusted his glasses. "Edward, you understand that without your backing, many of these accounts will become unstable. The bank will have to call them in," I finished for him. "Yes, that is exactly the point," he studied me, hesitating. "Are you sure this is what you want? It will put him in a very difficult position." I leaned forward, my voice low and steady. "David, my wife defended him until her last day. She believed he would change. She died believing he would finally step up. He did not even show up to her funeral. I am finished protecting him. Whatever happens to those accounts, let it happen." David nodded slowly. He understood. Within an hour, I had signed the withdrawal papers. The guarantees were gone, leaving Daniel exposed to the bank's scrutiny. The first stone had been pulled from the foundation. Over the next week, I moved with precision. I contacted a former colleague who now ran a collections agency. He owed me favors from our business days, and I cashed them in. I quietly sold off several of Daniel's debts at a discount, ensuring they would be collected aggressively. They were no longer quiet obligations between father and son. They were now items in the hands of men who made their living ensuring payments were made, no matter the cost. At night, I sat in Helen's chair, the Bible resting on the table beside me. I whispered to her photo, "You wanted him to remember us." "He will, Helen. He will remember every sacrifice you made, because it is about to come crashing down on him." It did not take long. By Thursday, the first call came. Not to me, but to Daniel. A collections officer contacted him about a promissory note from years ago, one he had forgotten he even signed. By Friday, his mortgage company called, explaining that his co-signer had withdrawn, and now his payment history would be reviewed in full. On Saturday morning, his credit card provider froze his account due to risk factors. I did not hear it from him directly, but word traveled. Cedarbrook was a small town, and news spread quickly when someone like Daniel, who had always flaunted his lifestyle, began to stumble. At the hardware store, I overheard two men joking about how Daniel Foster must have hit hard times. At church on Sunday, Patricia leaned close and asked, "Is everything all right with Daniel?" I heard there was some trouble with his accounts. I simply shook my head and said, "He has important commitments." The irony cut deeper each time I used those words. The following Monday, Daniel showed up at my door, his usual confidence cracked. His shirt was wrinkled, his eyes tired from lack of sleep. "Dad," he began without pleasantries, "what did you do?" "The bank says you pulled your guarantees. My credit cards are frozen. They are threatening foreclosure if payments are not made on time." I stood in the doorway, hands resting firmly on the frame. I did what I should have done years ago. I stopped cleaning up your messes. His voice grew frantic. "You cannot just do that. You know what this will do to me and Laura. We have bills. We have obligations. We have a life to maintain." I kept my gaze steady. "Your mother had obligations too. Chemo appointments, hospital visits. Days she prayed you would walk through the door and sit beside her. You ignored all of them. If you can abandon your mother in death, you can handle your own bills in life." He stared at me, his jaw trembling with fury. "So you are punishing me?" "This is revenge?" "No," I said quietly. "This is consequence." For a long moment, he stood frozen, his face pale. Then he lashed out, his voice loud enough for neighbors to hear. "You are sick, Dad. You are grieving and lashing out? Mom would be ashamed of you." I stepped forward, lowering my voice. "Mom was ashamed of you." The words hit him harder than any fist. He stumbled back, eyes wide, then turned and stormed toward his car. His tires screeched as he pulled out of the driveway, but I did not move. I stood on the porch, calm as stone, knowing the first cracks had appeared. That night, as I sat in my study, the phone buzzed again. Daniel's number appeared, but I let it ring until it silenced. Moments later, my voicemail filled with his voice, angry at first, then pleading. "Dad, please, you cannot do this. I need your help. Laura is furious. She says I ruined her birthday with all this stress. If you care about me at all, you will fix this." I listened to the message twice, then deleted it. He had not once mentioned Helen. Not once. The next day, I met with Robert Miller, my attorney. He had been a close friend of the family for years, and he knew Helen well. I spread the documents across his desk, showing him the debt trail, the signed notes, the co-signed accounts. His eyes widened as he scanned the totals. "Edward, this is substantial," he said. "I want it airtight," I told him. "Every document accounted for. Every debt transferred, every loophole closed. If Daniel tries to claim ignorance, I want proof he signed every line." Robert nodded. "You are serious about this?" I looked him in the eye. "I buried my wife while my son threw a party. There is nothing left to protect." By Friday, the paperwork was in motion. Legal notices began their crawl through the system, letters on official stationery that would land in Daniel's mailbox within days. His life, which had been propped up by my sacrifices, was about to sag under its own weight. I imagined the moment he would open the first letter, the cold realization spreading across his face as he understood that the walls were closing in. I pictured Laura's reaction, her perfect nails tearing open the envelope, her voice rising in shrill accusation. I knew what would come next. Panic, blame, desperation. And it was only the beginning. One evening, as I watered Helen's roses in the front garden, a neighbor strolled by. He hesitated, then asked, "Edward, is it true what I heard about Daniel? That he is having money trouble?" I wiped my hands on a rag and looked him squarely in the eye. "He has important commitments." The neighbor nodded slowly, the phrase striking him as odd. But I walked back inside before he could ask more. Helen's roses bloomed behind me, red and strong, thriving despite the neglect they had once endured. She would have liked that. Inside, I returned to my desk. The papers were neatly stacked now, each one a weapon I had already unleashed. Yet I knew this was not enough. Daniel's finances were the foundation, but his pride was the facade he lived behind. To truly make him face the truth, I would need to attack both: money and reputation, support and social standing. He had built his life on my sacrifices and the approval of others. Without those, he would have nothing. I leaned back in my chair, staring at Helen's photo on the desk. "You wanted him to remember us, Helen," I whispered. "By the time I am done, he will never forget." The financial cracks were only the beginning. I had spent decades building my reputation in Cedarbrook, through my company, through the church, through quiet acts of community service. People trusted me. They respected Helen. If Daniel thought he could live shamelessly after missing his mother's funeral, then he underestimated how small this town really was. Cedarbrook never forgot, and it never forgave a slight against its values. The opportunity came sooner than expected. On Sunday morning, I attended service at St. Mark's, the church Helen had loved. I had barely sat down when Patricia leaned toward me, whispering in confusion, "Edward, where was Daniel during the funeral?" I kept waiting for him to arrive. "People have been asking me." Her voice carried just enough to catch the attention of those sitting nearby. I took a slow breath. For a moment, I thought of softening the truth, as Helen might have done. But then I remembered her worried notes, the way she excused Daniel's absences during her illness. No more excuses. He chose Laura's birthday party instead, I said firmly. The silence that followed spread like wildfire. Whispers rippled through the pews, faces stiffened with disbelief. St. Mark's was more than a place of worship. It was the hub of Cedarbrook's community. Whatever was said there on a Sunday morning traveled through every kitchen table and coffee shop by Monday. By the end of the service, I noticed people avoiding Daniel's name altogether. Some shook their heads with disgust. Others muttered things like, "How could anyone do that to his own mother?" Patricia looked stricken, her lips pressed tight. I knew she would repeat my words at her bridge club that very afternoon. And from there, it would travel across the entire town. That evening, I received a call from William Carter, one of the elders of the church and a longtime family friend. "Edward," he said gently, "I was shocked to hear what happened. I cannot imagine how painful that must have been for you. People are talking, and I want you to know the truth will not be hidden." "Thank you, William," I replied. "Helen deserves to be remembered with honesty." By Monday morning, Daniel's reputation had begun to unravel. At his office, I later heard, co-workers whispered about his absence from the funeral. A client canceled a meeting without explanation. By midweek, his supervisor pulled him aside and asked directly, "Is it true you skipped your mother's funeral for a party?" Daniel's denial was useless. The story had already spread too far. I had not spoken a single word beyond the truth, but the truth was enough. At the grocery store, I noticed people exchanging knowing looks when Daniel and Laura walked past. At the local diner, one of the waitresses told me quietly, "Laura came in yesterday. She complained that people were staring. She said this town is too judgmental." The waitress shrugged. What did she expect? Laura thrived on status. She loved posting pictures of dinners, vacations, and birthday celebrations, her smile wide as she displayed the life they thought they deserved. But in Cedarbrook, those posts turned into evidence of their selfishness. Every image of balloons and champagne became an unspoken reminder of where Daniel had been while his mother was laid to rest. It did not take long for the whispers to find their way to places that mattered most to Laura. At her yoga studio, the instructor quietly suggested she might want to take a break from classes until things settled down. At the boutique she favored, her credit was mysteriously denied, and the staff who once fawned over her now offered curt smiles and quick service. For Daniel, the humiliation hit hardest at work. One Friday morning, he attended a meeting with senior management. One of the executives, a man who had known Helen from her volunteer work, leaned across the table and asked bluntly, "Daniel, is it true you skipped your mother's funeral?" Daniel stammered, tried to laugh it off, but the silence from the rest of the room told him all he needed to know. That evening, he appeared at my door, face pale, eyes bloodshot. "Dad," he snapped, "what are you telling people?" "Everyone at church, at work. They all know about the funeral. They are treating me like I am some kind of monster." I looked at him steadily. I told the truth. Nothing more. He shook his head, pacing like a caged animal. "You are ruining me. Do you even realize what you are doing? You are destroying my career, my marriage, my entire life." I let the words hang for a moment before answering. "You destroyed yourself the day you chose a party over your mother's final goodbye. I am not ruining you, Daniel. You are simply meeting the consequences you earned." His voice cracked, desperation slipping through his anger. "Dad, please." "Laura is furious. She says people are mocking her behind her back. She blames me. She is threatening to leave if I do not fix this. I need your help." I stepped closer, lowering my voice. "Your mother needed your help when she was sick. She needed you when she was dying. You did not show up then. Do not expect me to show up now." His lips trembled. For the first time, I saw fear in his eyes. Not fear of me, but fear of a life without the safety nets we had always provided. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came. Finally, he turned and left, slamming the door so hard the frame rattled. That night, I sat at Helen's desk, her photo watching me as I worked. My plan was unfolding exactly as I had intended. The finances had begun to crumble. The reputation was unraveling. Next would come the career, the one thing Daniel still clung to as proof of his worth. He had never truly earned it, but he used it as his shield. Once that was gone, he would have nothing left to hide behind. The following week, I called Sarah Jensen, the HR director at Daniel's company. She had been a quiet supporter of Helen during her illness, bringing meals and sending notes. She knew Daniel's work history better than most. When I asked her if his performance had matched the opportunities given to him, she sighed heavily. "Edward, between you and me, Daniel has been a problem for years. Missed deadlines, client complaints, excuses. The only reason he has not been dismissed already is because of your name and your reputation. But with all this coming to light, I doubt the company will tolerate him much longer." Her words confirmed what I already knew. Daniel's career was built on borrowed respect. Now that respect was gone. That Sunday, I returned to St. Mark's. After the service, one of the elders shook my hand firmly. "Edward, your wife raised you well. You honored her. That is more than can be said for your boy." His words were harsh, but I accepted them. The truth was harsher still. When I returned home, I sat in the study and wrote in my journal. For decades, I had carried my family on my shoulders. Now I was laying that weight down, one piece at a time. I could almost hear Helen's voice, gentle but resolute, saying, "Do not let him forget." He would not. By the end of the month, Daniel's financial life was tangled in notices and overdue bills. His reputation was in tatters, and Laura was restless. But I knew this was still only the middle of the storm. The next strike had to be legal, final, and irreversible. His inheritance, the future he believed was guaranteed, would vanish before his eyes. I made an appointment with Robert Chen, a lawyer I had trusted for more than 20 years. He had drafted Helen's will, handled contracts for my construction business, and guided us through countless legal knots over the decades. He had also been a friend, one who brought Helen flowers when she first began chemo and never failed to check in during her treatments. When I called and told him I wanted to discuss changes to my estate, his voice grew quiet. "Edward, I was expecting this. Come in tomorrow afternoon." His office occupied the top floor of a downtown building, the kind of place lined with dark wood panels and heavy shelves of law books. As I sat across from him, the city lay stretched out beneath the tall windows. Sunlight poured in, catching the dust motes in the air. Robert studied me carefully before speaking. "You want to update your beneficiaries after Helen's passing?" he asked gently. "No," I said, my voice firm. "I want to remove Daniel completely." For a moment, his composure faltered. He had known our family too long to hear those words lightly. "Edward, that is a serious step. You know this will not just affect him. It will affect any children he might have too." I leaned forward, opening the folder I carried. Inside were copies of promissory notes, bank records, and Helen's handwritten notes of sacrifice. I laid them out one by one. "Robert, my wife gave everything she had for that boy. He missed her appointments, ignored her pain, and finally, he skipped her funeral for a party. He is not entitled to another cent. I want it in writing with no loopholes." Robert scanned the documents, his face darkening as the story unfolded in the numbers and handwriting. "I see," he said finally. "Then we will create a new will. The assets will bypass him entirely. But where do you want them to go?" I took a deep breath, and for the first time since Helen's passing, I felt something close to peace. "I want to establish a foundation in Helen's name. The Helen Foster Memorial Foundation. It will provide scholarships for underprivileged students and fund cancer research. Every dollar will go to causes she cared about. Daniel will be excluded explicitly." Robert's eyes softened. She would have loved that. We spent the next 2 hours drafting documents. Every clause was written with precision. My house, the business, the retirement accounts. All of it would transfer to the foundation. The only personal item I excluded was Helen's wedding ring. That would be buried with me. Everything else, even her jewelry, would serve a greater purpose. Robert made sure I understood each detail. "You realize, Edward, that once this is signed and witnessed, it cannot be undone by Daniel. He cannot contest it successfully if we do this properly." "That is exactly what I want," I said. 2 witnesses from the firm joined us as I signed. My hand was steady, each signature a quiet act of justice. With every stroke of the pen, I imagined Helen smiling, free from the worry that had weighed her down in her final years. When the signing was complete, Robert leaned back. "I will file this immediately. Do you want Daniel to be notified now or later?" "Now," I said. "I want him to know his future is gone." The notice was served within 3 days. Laura was the first to react. She stormed into my office unannounced, heels clicking furiously against the tile floor. Daniel followed, pale and embarrassed, but he trailed behind her like a shadow. She slammed her hand against my desk. "You cannot do this. You cannot just erase him from everything." I did not rise from my chair. I kept my voice calm. "I can, and I did." Her face flushed crimson. "This family business is his birthright. He worked here for years. He built this with you." I opened a folder and slid a stack of reports across the desk. Missed deadlines, complaints, inflated expense accounts. He did not build it. He took advantage of it. And as of today, his name is no longer tied to it. Daniel shifted uncomfortably, mumbling, "Laura, maybe we should..." But she cut him off, her fury louder than his shame. "This is theft. This is abuse. We will sue. We will take everything back in court." Robert Chen, seated beside me, spoke before I had to. "Mrs. Foster, the documents are airtight. The will is valid, witnessed and recorded. There is no legal basis for a claim. Your husband has been explicitly excluded, as is his right." Laura's eyes darted between us, searching for weakness. Finding none, she turned her venom toward me. "Helen would be disgusted by you. You are a bitter old man destroying your own family out of spite." I met her glare without blinking. "Helen left me notes. She worried he only loved our money. She died fearing we had raised a child who could not love us back. I am not bitter, Laura. I am honoring her truth." For the first time, Daniel spoke with desperation. "Dad, please. You do not have to do this. I know I made mistakes. I know I should have been at the funeral. But cutting me out like this, that is too far. Your mother deserved one day," I said coldly. "One day out of 35 years. You gave it to your wife instead. Now you can live with her and without me." Laura's voice rose to a shriek. "You will regret this. When you are old and sick, and you have no one, you will regret it." I pressed the security button on my desk. Within moments, 2 guards appeared in the doorway. "Please escort Mrs. Foster out," I said quietly. She fought, screaming accusations of elder abuse and mental instability. Daniel tried to calm her, but his words only fueled her rage. The entire office watched as she was dragged out, her voice echoing through the halls. Daniel stood in silence, his shoulders sagging under the humiliation. When the noise finally faded, he looked at me with broken eyes. "Dad, I am all you have left." I studied him for a long moment. He wanted me to see the boy I had once carried on my shoulders, the boy who laughed in the backyard with Helen cheering him on. But all I saw was a man who had betrayed his mother's memory. "No," I said softly. "You are just someone who used to be my son." His face crumbled. Without another word, he left, his footsteps heavy in the hallway. That evening, I returned home and sat at Helen's desk. I touched her photo, whispering, "It is done. He cannot touch a single piece of what we built. It will live on through others, not him." The house felt strangely lighter. For the first time since the funeral, I felt as though I had taken control of something Helen would have approved of. Yet I knew this was not the end. Daniel's collapse had only begun. Laura's fury would fester. Their lives would unravel further, and I would not need to lift another finger. The truth and their own choices would do the rest. The unraveling began almost immediately. Within weeks of being served the legal notice, Daniel's work environment turned hostile. His supervisors, already wary of his poor performance, now had no reason to tolerate him. His family name no longer carried weight, and when whispers of him skipping Helen's funeral reached the board, The decision was made quietly but firmly. His position was eliminated. He came home with a cardboard box of his belongings, humiliated and broken. Laura was livid. She had married him expecting security, prestige, and the endless flow of money she had grown accustomed to. Now she found herself facing creditors, a dwindling lifestyle, and the humiliation of being whispered about in salons and boutiques. One evening, their fight was so loud, the neighbors heard her scream, "I did not marry a failure. I did not marry you to live like this." It did not take long for her to pack her things. I later heard from Patricia that Laura had moved in with an old boyfriend who owned several restaurants in the next city over. Her departure was final, marked by a venomous note she left behind. "You dragged me down with you. Do not call me." Daniel was left alone in the house they could no longer afford. Mortgage payments stacked like bricks on his chest, late fees mounting, utilities threatening disconnection. He tried calling me several times, but I ignored the messages. The voicemails grew increasingly desperate. "Dad, I am sorry. Please, I cannot do this alone. Please." His voice cracked in places, but it was always followed by some excuse, some demand. By the third month, the foreclosure notice appeared on his door. I drove past one evening and saw him standing outside. Staring at the paper taped to the frame, his shoulders slumped. For years, I had driven past that house proud that my money had given him a foundation. Now I saw it for what it truly was, a monument to every sacrifice Helen and I had made, sacrifices he had squandered. When the auction date arrived, I did not attend. I did not need to. I knew what would happen. Investors would buy the house, and Daniel would be left to gather what little dignity he could. A week later, I drove by again. A moving truck sat in the driveway. Furniture was being hauled out by strangers. Daniel stood by the curb, clutching a single box, watching his life be dismantled piece by piece. I did not stop. Weeks later, a letter arrived at my office. The handwriting was shaky but familiar. Inside, Daniel begged for forgiveness. He wrote about losing his job, losing Laura, losing the house. He admitted he had been wrong, that he should have been at the funeral, that he had taken too much for granted. He asked me to meet him at the park where I had once taught him to ride a bicycle 30 years earlier. I considered ignoring it, but something in Helen's voice echoed in my mind. Do not let him forget us. Meeting him was not forgiveness. It was closure. The next afternoon, I walked to the park. The trees had begun to change color, their leaves drifting to the ground in fiery reds and oranges. Children played in the distance, their laughter carried on the breeze. Daniel sat on a bench, hunched over, his frame smaller than I remembered. His shirt was wrinkled, his shoes scuffed. He looked like a man aged 10 years and 6 months. When he saw me, his eyes filled with tears. "Dad," he whispered, standing slowly. "I am sorry." I did not speak at first. I let the silence stretch between us, forcing him to feel it. "I know I was wrong," he continued, voice breaking. "I should have been at Mom's funeral. I should have been there for her when she needed me. I was selfish, I was stupid, and I lost everything because of it. Please, Dad, please, can we start over?" I studied him. For the first time, there was no arrogance. His eyes, no entitlement, only emptiness. But I knew better than to trust words alone. "What was your mother's favorite flower?" I asked quietly. He hesitated. "Roses?" My chest tightened. Helen's favorite flower had always been daisies. She had told him that countless times. He had not listened. "What was her favorite hymn?" I pressed. His lips parted, but no sound came. I shook my head. You never really knew her. She gave everything for you, and you could not give her one day. You say you are sorry, but you cannot even remember the simplest things about the woman who loved you more than anyone else. Tears rolled down his face. Dad, please. I know I failed her. I know I failed you. But I am still your son. I stepped closer, my voice steady. No, you are someone who used to be my son. That boy is gone. What stands before me is a man who traded his family for selfishness, he sobbed, covering his face with his hands. The sound tore at me, but I did not bend. You wanted my help because you think I am your safety net, I said. But I am not. Not anymore. Your mother and I gave you everything. Now, you will stand on your own. You will carry the weight of your choices. That is the only way you will ever learn. He looked up at me, his face streaked with tears. So this is it? You are just walking away? I nodded. Yes, because this is what justice looks like. Helen deserved better, and I will honor her by never letting you forget what you chose. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The wind rustled the leaves. Children's laughter echoed from across the park. Finally, I turned and walked away. His cries followed me, but I did not look back. That evening, I sat in Helen's chair with her photo in my hand. For the first time since her passing, I felt peace. The plan was complete. Daniel's finances were gone. His reputation was ruined. His marriage had collapsed, and his inheritance had been redirected to the foundation that bore her name. Every piece of our sacrifice now lived on in others who deserved it. Months later, on what would have been Helen's birthday, I visited her grave at Green Hill Cemetery. I brought daisies, her favorite, and laid them gently at the base of her headstone. The grass was neatly trimmed, the air filled with birdsong. I told her about the scholarships we had awarded, the families we had helped, the lives we were changing. I told her she would have been proud. As I stood, I whispered softly, "It is finished, my love. He will never forget you now."